Okay. If you want to see, sure. Go down the way, directly. Be up there.
You can be up there, yeah.
So there's a here without all the deco. Oh, one right there. There's a big space right there. Yeah. We haven't. We're pretty turned it on, but only bought that for the space. It's the fancy like laser and strobe everything, but you can control everything about it. Really? We're looking into that right now. It's like sweet. So, I want to remember front end, most of the stuff. 32X, Genesis 32X. I never had 32X. Saturn, Dreamcast. Oh, that is a Dreamcast. Nintendo's, Nintendo's. I own them. I own them. Aspect. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, my favorite game. Yeah, I remember. Games, all that you got. You made that switch with most of it. You know, I set up. No, Bob. Pretty dope, Bob. Yeah, we're great. Here we go. Well, oh yeah. You're gonna be here for hours. Oh.
Turn the light off. Are you going to turn the lights off here?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just waiting for, I know David really wanted some light while,
Cutting it.
while cutting before the class starts.
No, I'm good. I'm good. There's no rush. There's no rush.
No one asked if many people signed up, but you know, if there was no maximum, they
Oh, about signing up, yeah. Oh, I've had tons of sign up, so. So I'd probably say we could get even more than that. What's important?
Huh?
What's important?
I don't know. I lost track. Oh, it's important to learn that.
Ah, yes.
I mean, I'm still having it. It's the videotape.
That's my friend Chris. We're going to Gen Con. I was talking about we're going to Gen Con. So.
Cool. Yeah, I want to go for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, all my buddies, when we were younger, used to go over to Wisconsin to it all the time for HB, but never went to school. This year, I'm going.
I go to that and Origins mostly for, well, I mean, it's fun. It's a fun convention, but also mostly for getting publishers.
Okay.
I go to publisher speed dating. I got 2 contracts last year that way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, they really love the i3 Detroit laser cut prototypes.
Right.
Kind of gives them a vision for what the selling point is.
Yep. Yeah, definitely got that issue because I got sucked into the addiction of fantasy flight deck. Love that.
It is. Let me move that.
Yeah.
Probably a laptop. Probably a laptop.
Oh.
Hi.
How you doing? Good.
Well, it's more about what they're talking about. But you can, I mean, towards the thing it has.
That makes awesome.
Right.
That's it here.
Pretty good.
I consider it like that. Either a candidate. I like playing on the my girlfriend looked at my girlfriend and told me I need to make like smaller. Yes. Like I make I I've got a quarter. Especially if it's about the smallest I can get. I got 4 of them. I got one this way, one upside down, one like,
Yeah, actually, could you turn off the lights? Thanks.
Open has a good
four-wheel van, so it's already made down in color. And the last thing I had is
Also that strip right there, yeah, perfect, thank you.
One of them like it burns on.
No, that dude. Good. Yep, everybody else. Let's get back.
That's the important part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fancy
That
oil.
was about hand night. Yeah, it was better going. But it was better than later. But the table was bottom of the blank sign. I put the team blank was off. And from the 3,000, two had simple hats on. The other one had a simple hat on. So funny. And then the one didn't. I think it midnight. And they went to flashing lights up on the ceiling. As quick as we did that, we made usually it used to be a thousand tons. Oh my God! I remember they were. That's funny. So one, one game called Jared House Event. I think it's called Fighting. Instead of guns, you fight people, you know, words not we're zombies, so zombies can't even check in the back. You can only watch them go fight so fast and then check it open and something like that. I mean, I was doing that actually. You fight well, really good well.
Yeah, I don't get no like that.
Oh, good guy. I never had one. No, the Vegas CD was like that. That's what it was. I'm sorry, Greg.
All right, I'll see you later.
One was that.
I go back to that. It's as small as what go back. We walk up from the back and we talk.
Yeah. All right, don't run too long because I only got 29 hours of recording time.
Uh-oh. Well, the Google Hangout is going to end in 8 hours, so we have bigger constraints. All right. So, am I audible? Can you hear me talking? Can you hear me?
Oh, no, I can hear you.
I'm talking to our Google Hangouts remote people. It's not actually telling me anyone else is on the call. Oh no, there it is, 3 viewers. I've added a chat here if you cannot hear me. Sure. All right. Adobe Illustrator for toolpaths. So let's see. Looks like they're going to be looking up my nose, for which I apologize. All right, so Adobe Illustrator for toolpaths. Looks like we have everybody here. So we're going to briefly also cover on engraving today by request. I try to teach this class at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. There are going to be other opportunities as well. And today we're going to also briefly touch on how to use raster rather than just vector to engrave a photo onto something. But first, let's talk about the difference between raster and vector. So let's open up a example of an SVG file. I'll show you how the data is represented in vector art. So these are 2 different ways of representing graphic data. Now the raster, you're probably already familiar with. So with raster art, it's like in Photoshop or in a photo, you'll have data that's being represented as a series of pixels. It's a grid with rows and columns, in which each grid is assigned, each grid point is assigned to a color. So I'm going to bring up one that a piece of art that me and Thad have been working on for actually milling one of my game pieces for use in the injection molder. Pieces for mill. So here we have these. This is represented in SVG format. This is represented in AI Adobe Illustrator format. Oh, and I'm going to do a screen share. I strongly encourage anyone in the chat to tell me whether you can hear me or not. I'm not getting any feedback from you guys, and you haven't been able to see any of the stuff that I've been showing everybody else, so I'm a little concerned that you're not actually getting any of this. All right. So I'm going to open up this SVG file in Sublime Text. Okay. Right. So here you can see in, this is just a text editor. This is what an SVG file actually looks like. So as opposed to raster, where the data is represented as this pixel is this color, and the next pixel to its right is this color, and then you go, and now you go down to the next row, and it's a series. Instead, this is actually geometry math. So in scalable vector graphics, which is what SVG stands for, it'll say, okay, well, it's basically like HTML in here, where you've got parameters. Here's how wide my whole document is. Here's how high my whole document is in pixels. And each path is represented as an element. Now, what I just opened up was that shape right there of a camel. And so it's just one path which forms the perimeter, and that's the path your tool will follow, whether it be the laser cutter, vinyl plotter, or what have you. And it just describes the path that it will go along. So let's open up Adobe Illustrator. I'm just going to go ahead and open up that same file in Illustrator. The AI is just a native format, but Illustrator works perfectly well with scalable vector graphics at the same time. Go to Google Drive. Go to Mill, and we'll open up that one. So, okay, now you open up a document and you can only see a little piece of it, or you see nothing, or you only see a corner, or it's off to the side in a weird way like this one is. Handy trick, Control-0. It's going to center the entire page within the bounds of what you're viewing. So you're going to find that's one of the handiest things, because you get lost positionally in Adobe Illustrator of where your view is a lot. If you write down Control-0, that will be your friend, because it's going to just reorient you to just fill in the page itself as your screen height and width. So you can see the actual path when you click on it. Here are these points. That's how vector art is represented, as a series of basically connect the dots. And then each point, I'm going to tell you about these two different arrows up here in a moment. Each point would let you create what's called a vector. Now, you might recall in the famous comedy Airplane, the line, what's your clearance, Clarence? What's your vector, Victor? And this is all about, in space travel or air travel, an object is actually following a trajectory that if it just keeps going in that direction, it's going to go along this parabolic arc through space. That's what these handles are. So you've got to connect the dot, but not only do you have a connect to the dot, but it has vector information about how far it's going in which direction. So it assigns a direction and a number of intensity in that direction that creates this curve rather than just straight lines between all your dots. So in order to use this, I've got the black arrow up here and the white arrow. That's one of the least intuitive things. And once you learn that, you're going to get really far. The black arrow is for selecting entire objects, such as this entire path. So when I've got that black arrow selected, I can scale it. If you put your cursor off to the side here, notice how your cursor changes to a rotation. You can rotate it, all kinds of convenient things like that. I'm going to Control-Z to do a couple of undos. Oh, right, I got to change this. Thank you, Sarah. Got to change the screen share to actually look at Adobe Illustrator. Screen share, Adobe Illustrator. All right. Oh, yeah, great idea. That is the best idea. Entire screen. Thanks, Dan. So here you have what I've been talking about. The black arrow controls this entire object here. The white arrow controls individual anchor points. And in Inkscape, they're called nodes. In Adobe Illustrator, they're called anchor points. You can click and drag individual anchor points. You can grab their handles and rotate the handles around to change what vector they have, and so forth.
Now, is that the same in Inkscape? In Inkscape, I don't recall there being a white arrow and a...
yeah, Inkscape does actually have, it's just not a white arrow. Their icon in there actually shows you 3 nodes and shows you selecting one of them.
Okay.
So that interface is one of the biggest differences. Yeah, it's one of the differences you run into first and most often. So here, it's nice that you have some convenient, some convenient shift modifications for operating with anchor points. Let's use this pen tool. You can actually just do a connect the dots with the pen tool and make a new path. And notice always in Adobe Illustrator, notice what your mouse looks like at any given time. So watch your mouse change, your mouse cursor. Because as you watch your mouse cursor changing, if you watch that carefully, you'll notice important things. If you don't watch it, you'll miss important things. Notice how now it's got that minus. I can delete anchor points now. And here it's got a plus. I can add anchor points. So it's a contextual mouse cursor in Adobe Illustrator that will constantly give you information that you almost always need a lot. So if I hold down the Alt key, always experiment with these three modifier keys, Shift, Control, and Alt, with all of your tools. You'll learn a ton just by experimenting with them to find out what those three modifier keys do. I can use this Alt to hold down one of these anchor points to give it handles that it didn't have before. The quickest, most convenient way to draw, you just do a bunch of straight line, dotted line paths, hold down the anchor key, and now give them the curvature you intended them to have. That's the quickest way to draw an object in Adobe Illustrator. Now, for toolpaths, the fill does not matter. Excuse me, I just got over getting sick last week. My voice is breaking a bit, cracking a bit. You do not need a fill for Laser Cut 5.3, for example. It's going to completely ignore the fill. So we're only dealing with paths here. Right down here is where you can control which one of those you're dealing with. You're going to change the path, or you can change the fill. And by clicking X, the X button will switch between those. Is the none. You really need that a lot of the time just to clear things. So let's say that I've made a bunch of, you've opened up somebody else's document, and oh, sweet Lord, and all of it is holy. They have just made so many things that are only applicable to printing. You don't care about all this stuff they've done that would only matter if they print out their page. They've made the stroke huge. All you do to prepare this for Adobe Illustrator, for the laser cutter, Control A, control everything. And either down here or up here in the here's the stroke palette off to the side. Give it a stroke of 1. Everything will be consistent, right? Because if you just want toolpaths, you don't care how it looks. All the various different pretty styles that could be applied to it. Those don't actually matter because the tool is just going to follow the path. So you want to get rid of the fill too. You'll just, there you go. So now I'm going to show you what I like to call reality mode. Control Y, definitely write that down. Because if we're only dealing with how to create toolpaths for your vinyl sticker or what have you, reality mode tells you exactly what you're really getting. Because if you're looking at it in preview mode, Control Y toggles between previewing what it would look like if you print it to a computer printer, or made an image to go on the web or something, and reality mode. So, which Adobe Illustrator calls outline mode. But this reality mode is going to tell you exactly where the laser head or the vinyl plotting head what path it'll follow. Otherwise, you can get really confused in preview mode because a lot of things can look a certain way and they aren't really. For instance, let me go back to preview mode, and let's say that this path has no stroke. It has a stroke with a width of 0. Well, it's invisible, right? I go to reality mode, and now, oops, I go to reality mode, and all is made clear to me. I strongly recommend it. Sometimes you can have this. Let's say somebody has gone into the object menu and said, lock this selection, which is Control 2. Well, okay, now I can't even click it. It's invisible and I can't even click it. If you're having trouble with the laser cutter or whatever, you might want to try reality mode. Show you all that truly is there, lift the veil, look behind the curtain. If somebody has gone in there and locked an invisible object, because I don't know, they're cruel to you or something, go into Object menu and click Unlock All. Another thing that can trip people up, there is a palette called Appearance. It'll show you a lot of interesting styles that only matter if you're printing things. So let's say here we have, I'm going to go into the stroke and say somebody has decided this needs to be really pretty and have a stroke of 5 points. and they're going to give it a weird effect, which I encourage you, please do not use, because it's going to trip up the laser cutter. Like it's going to be feathered. So it's going to feather the edge of this, and the laser cutter is going to have no idea what on earth this even is. So what you can do, select all, go into here. There's a clue, mixed appearances. So select some things. Oh, here we go. So this appearance panel will show you all the appearances that have been applied. Let's say somebody had applied a feather, but it was so subtle you don't even notice. And you don't realize that's the problem. This will show it to you. So you click on that feather effect in that menu, and you click this trash can. There you go. Clear it out. So these are tricks you can use to make sure that all we're dealing with is toolpaths. That's all we care about. So let's say you want to put this into LaserCut 5.3. It will actually care about the stroke color. What it'll do is it'll give you different layers in LaserCut 5.3 where one of the layers will be an engraving layer and another will be a cutting layer, or a different one will be a cutting layer at a different speed or a different power or whatever you want, that you can adjust those settings in LaserCut. Convenient thing to do in Adobe Illustrator is to go in here and say, everything that I want to be on the same layer, let's go up to this color palette. I'm just going to make them the same color if they're going to be on the same layer. And it doesn't matter which color mode you're in. Don't worry about that. Sometimes you'll come in here and like, RGB, what? Just take this, here's an eyedropper tool. You can say this one is going to be same color as that with the eyedropper tool. Sets it to the same color. So that can make things more convenient for organizing your artwork into LaserCut layers. Because LaserCut basically just treats stroke color as a layer. So what the laser is going to do in engraving mode is go back and forth. Just going to delete these for simplicity for now. Press the delete key. Press the delete key. It's going to go back and forth like a printer and engrave the top 1/4 inch off of this, or whatever your speed and power settings will give you, until it gets to the bottom. It acts just like a printer. It just engraves the top layer of the material off. Oh, there you are. Let's get rid of that while we're looking at it. Whereas in cut mode, which is what we particularly need toolpaths for, it's going to follow this path and it's just going to cut. I mean, presumably all the way through the material. So you're going to decrease the speed and increase the power until it cuts all the way through the material. So the laser head will just go over the perimeter of this, or go around the perimeter and just cut the whole thing out. So let's talk about if you want to engrave a photo. Going to open up Photoshop. And if you don't have Photoshop, you can actually use remote desktop. Come in here to the space, get onto the Wi-Fi, and use our new Adobe Creative Suite, Creative Cloud. So exciting. From any laptop. It is on the server in the Fab Lab, in the fabrication lab. So you would need an actual thin client, or your own laptop, or some client with you. All right. Open up Photoshop. Before I go on, any questions so far about the material we've covered? Okay.
Like 10 years ago, with Adobe Illustrator, and there was a nice demo document that had a series of tabs and the exact mouse buttons you can trace. And it was kind of like teaching you how to write. When you were 6 years old, they had letters and like following the tabs and doing how to get straight lines, curves, and together. And I imagine somewhere out there must be a similar sort of demo document. It'd be a great thing to those people in
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yes. In fact, I'm gonna put a link if I can dig it up. There was a wonderful website that actually, in the web app, you could actually draw vector art, Adobe Illustrator style, and it trained you with a series of exercises, hands-on. I'll try to post that into the comment in our Facebook event after the class. Uh-oh, the screen is blurry, hard to see details. Not sure if there's anything you can do. Oh, I don't know. Okay, I will zoom in for, okay. I will zoom in for that when we do things in the future. All right, so in Photoshop, if you're going to prepare an image to be engraved. Okay, so let's say we want to engrave this parrot onto something. Well, first of all, it's a color image. That's just not going to work. So you need to change the color mode. But you don't just need to change the color mode to grayscale. You actually need to change it to bitmap color mode. So first we change it to grayscale, which will discard the color information. And now mode, bitmap. And I'm going to show you what these do. These are different dither methods. Let's zoom in here so those who are remote can see the outcome that we get. So here we have our friendly little parrot.
You're either going to turn it on or off, right? You can make it a single bit.
Every pixel will be 100% black or 100% white. Yeah, so that's the distinction between a scale of grays and the color mode in which it is just pure bitmap. So you click on bitmap, flatten layers, and let's say here's diffusion dither. Let's say we'll just have our output be 72 dots per inch. This is what a diffusion dither looks like. Now I put this at a super low resolution so that we could very clearly see what you get. It's going to actually fake gray by how many black pixels are scattered in the white. That's how it fakes gray. Let's undo. And now let's go to image mode again, switch it back to bitmap. Let me just flatten this layer first. I brought up the layers palette and just went into this menu, this arrow menu, and just said flatten image, so it's not going to keep giving us that message every time. But the important thing is change something to bitmap. Instead of diffusion dither, let's just use 50% threshold. Everything that is above a 50% will be black. Everything that is below 50% will be white. You don't get nearly as good a result. That's not going to look good engraved. So don't use 50% threshold. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. And now let's go to bitmap again. And let's try pattern dither. So now you see how very patterned it is. And basically, I've shown you all of these to say this. Use diffusion dither. That's the answer. So if you're ever curious about what these other ones do, don't use them. This is what they do. So the answer is mode, bitmap. If you don't like the output you get, increase the resolution. So this is 72 pixels per inch. Let's say 150 pixels per inch. And we're going to change it to diffusion dither. All right. Let me undo that. Try again. Image mode, bitmap. Let's all go all the way up to 300 pixels per inch. And look at that. This is what it gave us. You have to zoom really far in before you start to see the pattern of pixels. 300. So basically, if you increase the resolution, that's really going to be your best bet. So what we've done here is created a raster image in which it's gonna go back and the laser's gonna go back and forth, engraving one pixel at a time. And if the pixel is black, it turns the laser on, and if the pixel is white, it leaves the laser off in a series of pulses as it goes from the left to right across each row of the image. So that's what you're doing here. And there you go. Once you have that, you can open that in Laser Cut and you can engrave it onto whatever you like. Yes?
Something else that always gave me problems until I found on the internet a chart for it, figuring out what the best scan gap is.
Oh, yeah.
There are charts on the internet that
Sure.
will tell you your image is 300 dpi, use a 0.04, your image is 1000 dpi, use a point whatever.
Yeah.
Scan,
Yeah.
Easily findable on the internet.
Yeah, look up a scan gap chart. But scan gap is more of a topic for the class on how to actually operate the laser cutter. So let's go back to talking about vector, vector paths. The pen tool is your friend. Now notice here you have add anchor point, delete anchor point, convert anchor point. And these are all the things you saw when I held down Shift, Control, and Alt. I just have the pen tool, and you just hold down, there's Alt. Or with these contextual menus, that's showing you it's add anchor point, it just changes. Or if you hover over an anchor point, it just changes to delete anchor point. So a lot of those tools it'll just give to you. But all of these that you see in the toolbar have a whole set of other tools that drop down if you actually hold onto and click. Click and hold on any one of these. It'll give you other things that you can do. Rectangles, ellipses. So here's an ellipse. Let's change this to a nice color. Here's a star. Okay, so let's say I want to draw a star. I click and I drag from the center of where the star will begin. And if you hold down Shift, it'll constrain it so that one of the points of the star is pointed straight up. So anytime that you're using one of these tools, and I know the screen is probably blurry, and I apologize for that for remote viewers, but the holding down one of these tools and dragging, again, experiment with Control, Shift, and Alt. So Shift will usually constrain it. For example, it constrains most things. Here's a polygon, and you can rotate it. You see how it's rotating pretty freely, but if I hold down Shift, it's going to snap to perfect, to have one edge. The bottom and top edges are perfectly horizontal if I hold down Shift. Whereas I just get, something at whatever angle if I don't hold down Shift. And these, just like any other paths, can have points deleted or what have you. So one of the ways that you can create art in Adobe Illustrator is to actually add and subtract from things. So here I'm just making some primitive objects, polygon, star. What you can do is you can add and subtract them from each other. So here is a tool called Pathfinder. And you can hold down Shift to select an additional shape. So now I've got two shapes selected at the same time. Let's make them our hexagon and oval. I click the oval, click the hexagon, click on minus front. Whichever one of them is in the front will be cut out of whichever one was in the back. Adjust. Control room. So I hope those who are remote can see that without too much blurriness. I don't know if there are some settings I can adjust, but I don't think I've ever found any in Hangouts previously.
There's no resolution settings. Your resolution of your screen and the resolution of their screen.
Okay. Oh, it's not controllable? Okay.
If you make it tweak the resolution of their display,
Okay. Yeah, for those who are remote, Dan was just saying that sometimes you can change the resolution of your display to make the difference, but there's nothing else that we can really change on our end since my resolution is as high as I can get it. Okay, so I'm gonna notice how when you have with the black arrow, I have the entire object selected, and just like before, I can rotate it. Notice the contextual mouse. As soon as I went to the correct location, showed me I can rotate it from here. And now I'm going to hold down Shift to add this hexagon to my selection. I go to Transformer and I use Union. So now you have both of them. This is going to save you a lot of time. from having to just draw a bunch of things by connect the dots freehand. It's going to save you a ton of time. Now, let's say that I take this star. I'm going to teach you the concept of compound paths. And I put it into the middle here. And I click with a shift, and I click to add the other shape so they're both in the selection. And I go to minus front. The star has now been subtracted from the outer shape. Now, you can't immediately see it visibly, but it is a compound path now. So if we did have a shape, one reason that I like to use fills in this class is to just show people demonstration of some concepts. I hold down Control. Now, give myself a fill on this. So that'll kind of show you that, if I move this to the back, that'll kind of show you that that's a compound path now. You can actually see right through it. Now, let's say you have a compound path and you want to release it. Object, compound path, way down here at the bottom. Release, which can be useful. I want to talk to you about this, what I did right here, because I wanted to show that to you. So I drew this rectangle. Control left bracket takes it all the way to the back. Control right bracket takes it all the way to the front. Because these operator tools, minus front, for example, that subtracted the star from the other shape rather than vice versa, one of them had to be on top. So you use the control key combined with the left bracket or right bracket to take an object and actually just move it to the top. Right. There's the concept of grouping in Adobe Illustrator. So let's say I take these two objects, object, group. Now what that does is that with my black arrow, I actually control both of them with just the single mouse click. I select one, I've selected both of them. If I do anything, what I do is applied to both of them. So that's grouping. If I rotate them, they rotate as one. Grouping is a useful way to organize your document. And then object ungroup. Now notice it's Control G and Shift Control G, G for group. It's a mnemonic device. I can ungroup like that. And now they operate independently again. Well, let's say I select them both with this is the marquee, by the way. If anybody says marquee, where you drag a box over everything. And everything inside that, what you just dragged, is now in your selection. Now I press Control G, they're a group. I go to my white arrow, the direct selection tool. My white arrow still only interacts with an individual element at a time. So I can grab a node and I can individually move it with the white arrow. Another thing the white arrow does, you can grab just one path, one line segment, and just grab it by the line segment. What you're doing is moving both of the points on the ends of that line segment at the same time. So now I'll show you how to adjust curves in that same way. I'm going to go to the pen tool, hold down the Alt key to turn it into this direct selection tool. I could just use this menu to get that. But I'm just going to hold down the Alt key, grab, and give it those curves. And note, by the way, if I just click, it takes the curves away from that. So I'm going to drag. So now if I take the direct selection tool and I grab this path, this line segment, I'm actually adjusting, by dragging it around, I'm adjusting both of the vectors. I'm adjusting the vectors on, oh, we lost the projector. That's weird. It's still on.
All from that.
Oh. Could be. Yeah. Oh, okay. So when I had the pen tool and I held down Alt, which is the thing that can actually add a vector, the vector handles, dragging handles to an anchor point, you also can just click the anchor point with that same tool, and it just takes away the handles. It turns into a straight corner. Exactly. How do you? Don't think so. I'll unplug the monitor cable, replug that.
Maybe you just turn off the two.
Yeah, I can't get the projector's power button to do anything.
Yeah, but sometimes, you know, like when you turn it on for the first time, it'll put like a test thing or startup, so you know the voltage is good.
Okay. That and that. Well, I hope the projector bulb didn't burn out. In which case, we might have to drag the large TV over here. Yeah, could you guys drag the large TV over here? And come grab one of the extension cords for it off there. Yeah, I prepared for this morning by trying it out and testing it. You just need one of those, yep, extension cords, and then it can be plugged in behind the, it can be plugged in on the tool bench right behind there.
Actually, I need to move it closer. Is HDMI out?
I do not have an HMI out on here. Hello. Yeah, probably the bulb.
Maybe eBay.
Yep.
Or 1-800.
No, it's on.
Oh, it's on.
There's HDMI.
Cool. All right. Well, the projector is back in business. Well, yeah, I think we'll keep the TV right next to there for now, just in case that happens again. Okay, so I'd like to teach you guys about layers as a way of organizing your artwork. Because when you've got an extremely complex illustration, you often have trouble clicking on the specific tiny little part that you want when it's extremely detailed. So you go to the layers palette. You know what? I've been showing you these palettes off to the side here. I want to just take a brief aside to show you how to make sure you can always get to them. One of the problems with Adobe Illustrator, one of the challenges, is the fact that the layout for your controls, it's so configurable that sometimes you'll walk up, you'll sit down at a workstation, you bring up Adobe Illustrator, and somebody has arranged the controls in a way that's completely unfamiliar to you. So I want you to know how to get all of these palettes anytime, which is the window menu. So the window menu has a list of all of them, and if you just bring up the window menu and go down to the one that you want, you won't have to rely on the button for this palette being docked on the side of the screen. You can just bring up the palette directly. So having said that, and that applies to all the palettes I'm showing you today, I just brought up the layers palette. This is a super handy palette. I'm gonna click this create new layer button down at the bottom of this palette. There we go. So we have these two layers, layer 1 and layer 2. I could double click this to rename it class demo layer. So we have layer 1 and class demo layer. So here we have this selected. I could right click it and say arrange. From the arrange menu, I choose send to current layer. Now notice, bring to front, bring forward, send backwards, send to back, just like those control left bracket and control right bracket commands that I was showing you before. They're right here as well. So here's send to current layer. I wish very much there were a keyboard shortcut for send to current layer. Sadly, there isn't. Like that's how you do it. That thing right there. You right click it.
And the current layer is the one that's selected in the current layer is the one that's selected in the layer palette. Then?
Yes. So in the layer palette, it's whichever one has this blue background. That is your select. You can only have if you can only have one layer selected at a time for that particular command to work, so that it'll know which layer to send it to. Notice how if I hold down Shift and I click a different layer, now I've selected multiple layers. Well, that command wouldn't work. It wouldn't know what to send it to. As a general principle in Illustrator, anytime you hold down Shift, you're adding to your selection of whatever context you're in. Okay, so I clicked into this big empty space in the palette to just have no select. You could do that too. So now notice that all my controls, my little handles and all these things you can grab, and even this little path that represents that, this little thing going down the center of the stroke here, which is easier if you're zoomed in. See, you've got that. All that's turned red. Control 0 to show the whole page again. So that's this color. You can see what color this layer is. If you double click the layer, so I could go in here, I could change the name of the layer. I also could change what color that layer is if you care, you know, if it matters to you. Each layer will have its own color for all the control paraphernalia that Adobe pops up on objects that you have selected. So if I, whoops, take the arrow tool, select everything. So this whole thing was grouped. So when I did that, it put all of them on that layer because I still had them grouped. Let's go up here and ungroup. So now I'm going to take this star that has been popped out of the compound path, and I'm going to move it to layer 1. I click on layer 1 in the palette, right-click, arrange, send to current layer. Layers will just be thrown out in the LaserCut 5.3, so don't worry about it. You can have art that's layered, but a lot of the time I like to just say for file size. Let's say I've got some huge file I'm going to be sending to LaserCut 5.3. I like to flatten all my layers as a last step. So I've done all my work. I'm ready to make this a sticker or a LaserCut project or what have you. Go into here. In the layers palette in the upper right is a little arrow menu. Flatten artwork. Again, no keyboard shortcut, unfortunately. Flatten artwork. All the layers are one layer and everything is in that layer now. Yep, that's flatten.
Condense everything into one single layer.
Yeah. In fact, you might have noticed for the sharp-eyed when I was in Photoshop, it's the same visual control language. In Photoshop, they had a layers palette. I brought that parrot in, and it had, for some reason, had like multiple layers, and I just flattened them. And when you change color modes like we did with that parrot, it's going to ask you, shall I flatten this? Yes. Because it doesn't know what to do with multiple layers otherwise. So anyway.
Otherwise, it would only be converting that one layer then to
right.
grayscale, which is all.
Yeah, Photoshop demands that the whole document, all layers, be in the same color representation model. In this case, in that case, we were changing it to bitmap. But anyway, so we're learning about layers here. I'm going to do undo so we get our layers back. So let's give this a fill just so I can show you again, so that you can see clearly what it is that I'm doing. I put a fill on that shape. If I grab this layer and I move it up, layer 1 up over class demo layer, it's actually changed the positioning. This is called the z-axis. So x being from left to right of the document, and y being from the top to the bottom of the document coordinates. Z is the direction between your nose and screen, shall we say.
The number of layers.
In layers, or even if they're on the same layer, each thing will have a Z ordering.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all elements have a Z ordering. So when you arrange them, let's say you've got construction paper cutouts, and you're arranging them onto one of those old slide projectors from your community college or whatever you did, and you can arrange them on that slide. Illustrator works like that. Everything is on top of something else and below something else. No two things are on the same level of Z ordering at any time.
Unless you group them into one single object.
Yeah, even within a group, interestingly. So within that group, each thing has its own Z ordering within the group. So it's nested. Yeah, you'll notice when you're grouping certain things, now all of a sudden they've popped together to come next to each other in the Z ordering. Let's say I had a bunch of, I'm going to make some shapes. Here's a shape, it's on top. Every time you make something, it's going to be on top in the Z order. Another shape, and another shape, and another shape. So I'm just clicking and dragging to make all these shapes. So now I click on this one, and I click on, let's say, the second to the, let's say, the top one. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click. I've now added. They're both in the same selection. Now I click Control G. I just grouped them. That thing that was near the bottom has now leaped up in the Z-axis to share so that they're sequential. That one on the top and the one that it's being grouped with are now next to each other in the Z order. Whenever you group things, whenever you turn them, if it's a compound path, by the way, such as this star inside that perimeter shape of the star, that actually is on the same Z ordering. That's what a compound path means. It's not a group. It's just one thing. So I'm going to ungroup this. So this right here, that interior perimeter shaped like a star is actually the same. It's considered to be the same thing. It's part of the same object as this outer perimeter shape. So they share the same Z-axis. They kind of have to. So when you have complex illustrations, it's really great to be able to just say, I'm turning off this entire layer. You click this button right here, which has an eyeball. It looks like an eye. So it turns off that entire layer so that you can keep just work with the things that you want to work with cleanly and not accidentally click on other things that are in the way. Another thing I can do is I can leave it visible, and I can click on the lock. So now, if I click right here, I'm not clicking any of this stuff. I'm clicking the thing on the layer below because nothing is clickable on this layer, which I want to see it, but I want it to be out of my way.
You can see it, but you can't touch it.
Yep, you can see it, but you can't touch it. So basically, these two buttons are visibility and lock on each layer. So let's see. What else would be good to learn about? We learned about all these different objects. Oh, okay. So let's say that I've made this path here. I want to teach you about Control J, which takes 2 points and makes them into 1 point. So let's say I've got 2 paths. I really want them both to be one long path. I'm going to hold down Control. This gives me my black arrow. I'm just going to click off there into nothingness so I can deselect the line I just made. Now I'm going to take my pen tool. I'm going to click over here. And I'm going to click right there, near it, but not on it. I just made 2 separate paths. What am I going to do? I really want this to be one long path. So I'm going to take my direct selection tool. I click on that node or that point. I click on that point, these 2 that are very near each other. I say Control J. And I just joined them. Control J for join. So this is now one long path with 4 points in it. The 2 on the ends and the 2 that are really near here in the middle, near each other. They are now connected by their own little tiny line segment.
So Control J add the line segment to that.
Yes. Right, so you have to have exactly 2 points selected. They have to be on the end of their paths. And then it'll create a line segment between them. I'm gonna.
Use it to close the polygon too?
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of let's say you want to engrave these shapes in laser cut. Well, it would demand that it be a closed path. Otherwise, it doesn't know exactly. Like if this thing that I had right here, this is not a closed path. It wouldn't know what to do. So if I click on that, I'm going to use my magnifying glass tool and drag a box over the thing I want to show you more closely. If I take my white arrow and I click to just select that, and I hold down Shift, and I click to select the point on the other end of the path. Now I click Control J. Okay, so now it created a segment between those two. Now it's closed. Now it's a closed path. So there are no open ends on this anymore. And if I want it to be open again, I can click this, hold down this eraser tool. There's an eraser tool, a scissors tool, and a knife tool. You need the scissors tool. And I click on the path. Okay, so it's now an open path. It's just that its 2 endpoints are on the same place. So I apologize on behalf of Adobe Illustrator, because sometimes there's going to come a day where you're like, what on earth is going on? Well, there are 2 points, and they're actually directly on top of each other. You can't tell that they're not unified. So what I can do is take my tool and then drag over that area that has both of those and say Control J. It just made the world's tiniest line segment of 0 length for those 2 points, which are literally on top of each other. So I'm going to take my white arrow, I click off to deselect, click on that anchor point, press the up arrow. The up arrow lets you nudge things. It lets you nudge things like a D-pad. Oh, I accidentally hit Shift and down, and that just basically nudges it 10 times all at once. If you don't like how much the nudge, like the distance of the nudge, by the way, you can change that. It's in Preferences under the Edit menu. It's all the way to the bottom. Preferences, there's actually under Units. Is it under Units? Yeah, General. Keyboard increment. That's how much your nudge will actually do every time you hit an arrow key. So you can change that if you want to. So sometimes you want the eraser tool, but it's more of a freehand thing. See this big circle? That's my tool. I'm going to double click on the eraser tool. That actually brings up a control. I don't want such a huge eraser. I'm just going to make this diameter be 6 points. So now that's what the eraser tool does. I click and drag. I just draw a stroke into my path. It's more of a freehand thing. You're not going to get really nice, precise, mechanically precise operations from that tool. I'll press Control D, so you kind of have to undo all those. The knife tool, I could just create, it's like the scissors tool multiple times. I'm just going to drag the knife across this entire thing. So I just cut it in 2 places. I just split it into 2 different objects. But again, it's freehand, so it's not very, very accurate. So now I want to talk to you.
You slice those.
Yeah.
You drag them apart now as a 2 separate polygons?
Yeah, so it's grouped.
Oh.
Oh, no, it's not grouped. Oh, cool. Yeah, so now I can just grab it, and these are 2 separate paths. When you use the knife tool, for a second there, I thought when you use the knife tool, it actually creates those as grouped. But no, they're just 2 separate objects. All right, so I'm going to tell you about numeric controls. If you want tool paths to laser cut something to mechanical tolerances, you're going to need numeric controls. So let's say I bring up Control M. Transform. Shift Control M. So Shift Control M brings up this move palette. And I'm going to cancel out of here, show you that again. The object, transform. This has got a ton of useful stuff in here. It'll also, oops, It'll also show you the keyboard shortcuts for them, such as moving and so forth. Let's say I want to numerically control rotate on this. I can either go here and click this rotate, or I can just double click on the rotate tool in the toolbar. This lets you precisely enter the exact number of degrees you want to rotate this. I click 30, click the preview button. It shows me what would happen if I rotate it that much. And if I click OK, it'll apply it. If I click copy, it creates a new copy of it that's been rotated 30 degrees. Yeah. Numeric controls are great. You can click on, let me just delete that. Select our object again. I'm going to double click on the scale tool. So instead of scaling manually and imprecisely, now you can scale it uniform or you can scale it non-uniform. With this non-uniform, I can enter a percentage of scaling just horizontally or just vertically or both. I can make them different. Now, notice this options, scale, strokes, and effects. If you keep scale, strokes, and effects, I'll show you what happened. What'll happen, I'll multiply this, let's say 200%. I turn off scale, strokes, and effects, and now the stroke is the same width. As opposed to if I scale, strokes, and effects, it increases proportionally. So anyway, scale gives you numeric controls. I'm gonna cancel out of that. You can go to Shift Control M and move precisely. So let's say I've got, I want to move this 2 inches. Whoa, that took it off the screen. Let's say I want to move it 0.2 inches. You can precisely control how much you're moving it vertically and horizontally. Or you can even input an angle right here and just input a distance, an absolute distance into this field right here. Click cancel on that. Click Control, or I'll do Control 0 to put the whole screen back into view. Any questions so far? Yeah, Dave. Yeah, you can do that. Okay, so how to rotate something according to a relative center of rotation. Now, look at the screen here. I'm going to zoom in a bit with my magnifying glass tool. Drag and drop over this area. Notice when I click rotate, there's a little blue, I don't know if you can see that remotely, but there's a little blue crosshairs targeting reticle smack dab in the center of this object. That's where it'll rotate around, but here's the cool thing. I can grab it while the rotate tool is still selected and move it. So now I can move it so that it'll snap to a point. That's super important. So I've just snapped to, it'll rotate around this point on this other unrelated object. So now if I click and drag, there you go. It's now rotating around that center of gravity. So now I go to double click this. Now notice I double click to bring up numeric control. Sorry, it just brought it smack dab into the middle of this path again, rather than the place where I just put it. You are also able to constrain, let's say I drag this and I move it over to rotate around there again, and I rotate this, but I hold down Shift, it's going to rotate it equal 45 degrees. By holding down Shift, I'm constraining it to rotate by exactly 45 degrees at a time. So even though I'm not using keyboard numeric controls, at least I have that much control by holding down Shift to constrain things. Generally speaking, Shift is used as a constraint in most sizing operations. Now, before I told you, which is also true, that Shift is very much applied for adding things to your selection. Both of these things are true. So when you're doing a transform, Shift usually means constraining it to rounded off values. And when you're doing adding things to selections, when you're using a selection tool, Shift will add things to selections. More numeric controls. Go to the Object menu, Transform, Transform Each, which is useful for transforming multiple unrelated objects that you have in your selection all at the same time. I'm going to cancel out of this. So go to the whole page, use my direct tool to select all of these objects. Oh, well, remember I can't. This layer is locked. Unlock that layer. select all these objects. So now I go to the object menu, transform each. Not only does it let me scale, move, and rotate all at the same time, and reflect along the x-axis and reflect along the y-axis, but it also will do it to every one of these objects individually. So I'm just going to grab this little steering wheel and rotate. Notice how they all rotate simultaneously. I've got the preview checkbox checked. It's not going to be applied until I click OK. So you can do scale, move, rotate, and reflect all in this palette and do it to all of these simultaneously with numeric controls. So let's say that I need to have something with some pretty good precision. I want this box and this circle to be aligned to each other in some way. A couple of ways I can do this. The easiest is just to use this palette called the Align palette. I can align them on the side, on the top, in the center. So if I vertical align center and then horizontal align center, they're perfectly centered. I can have multiple objects. Let's say I want this down there and this here and this here. And I really want the distance between them to be precisely the same between their centers. I could use this vertical distribute center like that. And now vertical horizontal align. So I've now got them all perfectly horizontally aligned, and I've made sure that their centers are perfectly distributed. But let's say instead of this, I really want to laser cut some slots, and I want to make sure all those slots are precisely the size of, let's say, a key rack. They all want to be I want all those slots to be the same thickness for the same key. So what I do, I'm going to delete these, make some rectangles. Okay, so I don't want, multiple different slots that I've just hand drawn. Let me undo that. I'm just going to Control C, Control V, and I'm just pasting a bunch of copies of that little slot. And I'm going to kind of arrange them over here near each other. I don't really know whether the distance is the same between them. It doesn't even look all that much the same. That would probably be a pretty bad looking key rack or floppy disks or whatever I'm storing in this. So yeah, they don't really look aligned. So I'm going to grab them and say distribute spacing. That actually just controls for the space in between their perimeters to be identical. So that means that if I take this and let's say I want this to be a particular height and width. Say I want like that. Look up here. You've got X and Y. This is called the context. This context-sensitive area will actually change what controls are in here at any given time based on what it is you happen to be doing at the moment. So there's an X and a Y, which is how far it is from the upper left-hand corner of the page. And then there's the W and H, which are the width and height. So I could say width and height. You've got your align palette right up there. Transform panel will tell you the exact width of whatever object you're working with and its height. So I could say I want the width of this to be my key, I've measured it, and the calipers say the key is, you know, 1/2 inch long. And the thickness of my key that I'm just gonna rest in this little slot is, let's say, 0.05 inches. There you go. You can directly numerically control, and the transform palette is, I'm gonna bring it up in the window here. There we go. So that's right over here. I personally have it docked with my Align palette and my Pathfinder that I showed you guys before. And again, I can say, well, I want the upper left corner of this to be exactly 1 inch. And 0.6. Now notice, see the reference point right there? You can actually control which corner of it you're dealing with numerically by, if I click this, now I'm dealing with its upper left-hand corner. If I click that little button, now I'm dealing with its lower right-hand corner that I'm adjusting numerically. And if I click that, now I'm dealing with its center. Oh, also, here's a handy shortcut for rotation. This, by the way, is shear. This is called shear. So if let's say I have this object and I want to shear this object, I could say 10% shear. So this is what shear is. All controllable from in there. So if I want to control the width, constrain the width and height, here I have my object. There is a little chain link icon right here. Now that button you'll see in a lot of different locations around Adobe Illustrator. Pay attention to it. It'll constrain the width and height of things so that if I change one of them, the other one will change proportionally. When I clicked it, these little lines appear showing that these two parameters are now linked. So I can say, I want my height to be, let's say, 0.1 inches. So I just doubled the height. Well, it went ahead and doubled the width for me.
And doubled the stroke.
It also did double the stroke at the same time. So yeah, for toolpaths, laser cut won't really care what width your stroke is, but it can be annoying if it starts to get in the way of you visually working, which is why I like to press Control Y. And I love to talk about, this is reality mode. I love to just reinforce it like several times throughout the course of every class because it's so handy. Reality mode will just show you only the exact strokes that are there, regardless of their, or the exact paths that are there, regardless of their appearance. The difference between the word path and the word stroke being that the path is the actual, what you see here. The stroke could be some stroke that's applied to it that has a particular width and is a particular color. Press Control Y again. For example, I could say, I'm going to click over here and say no stroke. It still has a fill, but regardless, the path is the only thing that we're concerned about, and the path will be there regardless of whether there's a stroke or a fill applied to it. So numeric controls are the handiest thing for getting mechanical tolerances in your designs, and then you can use so I talked about there being two ways to align things. I talked about the Align palette. The other thing is Snap to Grid. The View menu will have a lot of handy snapping options that will allow you to snap to point and snap to grid. So here, let's say Show Grid. That actually shows us where our grid is. It'll actually overlay a grid. And go back to the View and say Snap to Grid. So Snap to Grid is now turned on, which means that as I drag this, it's going to actually snap it to that grid. You can, and that's actually in Preferences, Edit, Preferences, Guides and Grid. So the grid line every 1 inch. Let's say I want a grid line every 1/4 inch. And how many subdivisions do you get? I'm going to turn off the grid for now. Turn off Snap to Grid. Turn off Hide Grid. The really nice thing is Snap to Point. So Snap to Point right here. That Snap to Point, I've had that on this whole time, so I could just take I could grab this point and I could drag it, and when it gets near enough to another point, it'll just snap to be directly on top of it. So super handy for getting precision. Any other questions at this point? All right. I'm going to ignore the effects palette. They're not really relevant for toolpaths. And, well, so here's the thing. You're going to be applying some of these. Let's say that you want to, some of these effects are just like that feather thing that I showed you earlier, which is more for printing and for graphics that go on the web or for print. You might need distort and transform. So yeah, I'll talk about that. With the distort and transform, you could say, let's say zigzag. You're applying a zigzag to a line. Whoops, oh, that's huge. I'm gonna change the size so it's a more reasonable zigzag. And a number of ridges per segment. So that you've got these things that Adobe Illustrator will give you, but I gotta tell you, if you use these, here's how you can actually make them not crash laser cut. So I've applied this zigzag. So here's the problem. Here's reality mode. It's still an oval. That's called an appearance. And the cool thing about appearances is that you can continue to go back in and change them even after you've applied them. But what you want to do is get rid of that changeability before sending it to laser cut or to the sticker plotter or whatever you're using. One way is to go into appearances, zigzag. So you can say clear appearance. You can trash to delete that appearance. Go to object and say expand appearance. Now that you've expanded appearance, you can no longer go in there and numerically edit the zigzag anymore. You're no longer able to say how many per line segment or what have you. But what you've done is, let's go into reality mode. You've now actually just confirmed that. And here's the biggest feature that people usually really need. Most of your projects are going to use fonts. And a font, let's face it, it's just an appearance. LaserCut doesn't know what to do with that. It's editable with a text cursor. So it's just like any other appearance that is continuously editable but isn't really real in reality mode. That's what fonts are like.
So right now, when you change, you go back to outline mode.
Sure.
You can, this will work with laser cut now.
Yes, it will now work. And now you can actually just adjust individual points that you couldn't before because it was really just oh, hey, we have two of these guys. We have two of these shapes. What on earth were they doing there? But yeah, you can actually grab individual elements. So I'll show you how to do that with fonts too, because that's the one that people really like to use. I'm going to use the font tool in Adobe Illustrator, which is this letter T, and click here and say font. So I am sorry that reality mode shows you this because it's not. You have to do the same thing that we did with this zigzag, which is go to Object, Expand. Keep Object and Fill selected. Okay. What you just did is make this laser cuttable and laser engravable. I'm going to use my magnifying glass tool to zoom in here. So instead of a representation that we can click into with a text cursor and change what the text says, now we have shapes that are in the shapes of the letters. And now we can directly edit them, and the sticker plotter and the laser cutter know what these are. These are actually toolpaths that can be followed now instead of just an appearance. So you can individually edit things. Now, if I use the black arrow and I click this, it's still got that entire word, that entire text block will be all treated as one big group. Just click Control G, Control Shift G to ungroup it so that I can work with each letter individually if I want to. Let's go back to the preview mode rather than reality mode. Notice O's come out as compound paths. It is, undo, the letter O is just two paths, one inside the other, and one of them is actually punched out of the other one. It's a compound path, which could screw you up in some instances. What I like to do before I send anything to the laser cutter. Compound paths are really useful for working with your art. But what I like to do is just grab the whole thing and grab all the art before I'm sending this to the sticker machine or the laser cutter or whatever, and go to compound path, release, just for safety. And then I give it a stroke of 1. I'm using, instead of the stroke palette I showed you before, I'm just using that context-sensitive menu up here because it says, hey, here's where you control the stroke. Stroke of 1, I'm going to go down here and click the fill and then click no fill. Let's say a stroke of 0.5 point. So I like to actually just grab everything, clear all the appearances, flatten all the layers, release all the compound paths, and just take the fill out of everything and just give it all the same stroke before I send it. For one thing, it reduces your file size when you're going to load it into the laser cutter a little bit, and it just makes sure that you have cleared out anything that might confuse the machine or give you problems. Any questions so far? So yeah, fonts and appearances are editable, and you have to take away their editability. That's also just called expand. Generally speaking, you see the word expand, you'll find that is taking away its editability. I got to show you another one called the blend tool. Let's take this line segment tool, and I'm going to drag a line. I'm going to hold down Shift to make sure the line is perfectly horizontal. That's just a path. Now I'm going to Alt, hold down the Alt key. This is a cool thing. If you hold down the Alt key and you grab something and you drag it, you're copying it. So notice how when I held down the Alt key, my cursor changed to these 2 little arrows, one black and one white. That indicates you're now making this, you're making a copying operation. I'm going to hold down Shift in order to make sure that as I drag it, I'm constraining this to be perfectly vertical, then I release. So now I've got 2 paths. Now let's say I want to make my key slots, but again, that I'm going to put my keys into, but this time I'm going to make this with a blend. Go to Object, Blend, Make. Blend just made a whole bunch of copies at precise intervals in between those 2. So I'm going to go back down to Blend again, but this time Blend Options. I've still got this thing selected, so I'm changing its options. Instead of smooth color, I'm going to say specified steps. I only want there to be 8 steps. Let me click Preview so we can see. Yeah, that looks pretty. No, let's say 6 steps. Let's say 5 steps. Yeah, that's good. Click OK. So now my blend has these 5 steps in between the 2 objects that it's a blend between. So I'll just take my direct selection tool and click on only this one. Because if I take my main selection tool, this is now all treated as one big object now. I really only want to work with one of them. Because one of the cool things you can do with blend, I'm going to click on that and say expand my stroke. So it actually transitions from this stroke width up here gradually down to this stroke width down here. And this is one of the reasons why you care about strokes, even though ultimately you're going to get rid of them, because now I can expand this. Click on this. I say Object, Blend, Expand. And now it's a series of independent objects I can work with. And now I can go expand again, Object, Path, Outline Stroke. So with Outline Stroke, you can actually expand your stroke into an outline of the stroke. And I've now made a key holder for my set of keys that are all different widths. So expand anything you can think in Adobe Illustrator, expand your mind. And anytime that you apply anything with numeric controls or any kind of appearance, think about how you could use that and then just expand it and get the actual thing that you can send to the laser cutter. Because it wasn't going to care about these stroke thicknesses if I had sent it over there. But once you take it and you expand to have a perimeter of the stroke, you can actually cause this to give you some handy, mechanically useful shapes. Yes. Showing reality mode. So here's what we got. And in fact, I'll click undo. That's what we had a minute ago in reality mode. It was still just this, even though I changed those stroke thicknesses. But now, Shift Control Z to redo, and I expanded all those strokes to be outlines of themselves. Undo again. Let's say I add an undo again so that this is now back to being a blend. And I'll show you, that's the preview mode, that's reality mode. I'm going to add an anchor point right here with my pen tool. And now I'm going to hold down Alt so that I can give it a curvature, and I click that point I just made, and I drag it to give it a curvature. Now let's see what preview mode shows us. You can transition between any two objects. Sometimes it'll give you surprising and perhaps even disappointing results, but sometimes it's really nice. So now if I say, I'm going to take my black arrow tool and select this whole thing and say Object, Blend, Expand. It is now a series of individual paths showing you that in reality mode. Switch back to preview. Now I go to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. Now it's the outlines of all those strokes. Here's what you get. So go ahead and use effects and appearances, but then expand them. And generally, the only ones that you can expand, like you can't, if I feather this so that it looks like a impressionistic watercolor painting, I can't really meaningfully expand that. Not really. Like it would give you a huge gobbledygook. But most of the effects you can apply that are expandable in useful ways like this, you'll find the effect, distort, and transform, such as the zigzag one that we covered a minute ago. So experiment with these various types and see what you get. So let's talk about, let's say, oh, these are too thick, but I've done a bunch of work and I failed to actually back up previous copies of this. Let's say I really wish that these had been thinner strokes to begin with. What am I going to do now? Am I out of luck? Well, you go to Object. Now go to Path, Offset Path. Offset Path is your friend. By the way, this is possibly the only awesome Illustrator feature that's actually done well in Laser Cut 5.3. So even if your project gets all the way onto the laser, despair not. It has that. This has what I'm about to show you. Click Offset Path. Click Preview. Whoa! Okay, that's way too much. Let me change this so it's more clearly visible. So now it's making a new perimeter around each one of these perimeters that is 0.01 inches out from where the other one was. But let's do negative so that it'll go inward. I wanted these to be thinner. So let's say we're offsetting this by negative 0.005 inches. So now I've taken those originals and I've actually created an offset that follows the path inward. This would not have worked if I had simply taken every one of these objects and just scaled it down. It would have looked wrong. So you can actually offset this. There you go. So now I take my offset object, move it over here so I could show it to you. Let's click Control Y, go back into preview. So I just made this one, and each stroke is now thinner than the one before. So offset paths is really useful. So these are all, by the way, still one big group, because when you take like a blend or an effect or whatever, and now you expand it into all its individual parts, it usually expands them as a group. So let's go to Object, Ungroup. Because I don't like that there's still a straight one here. I want them all to be curved. So go away. And there it goes with the delete key. All right. Any questions? I know some people came in late. It's fine if you want to like ask something to be repeated that was talked about before. All right.
I've got two things I'd like to touch on.
Yeah.
One would be doing engraving and a cutting path in the same document. And the second thing is, say I have a circular object and I want holes all the way around the edge. right now I make 1/4-inch holes one at a time.
Oh yeah.
Is there a way to make like a dozen
Yes.
1/4-inch holes?
So let's make a embroidery pattern, because this is cool. I actually did this project for somebody recently. You just want a bunch of evenly distributed holes, or let's say, yeah. So somebody came in and said, I really want there to be a, I want to make a laser cut ring, and I want to sew a bag onto it. So the ring will hold the bag open at all times. I said, okay, let's make a circle. Hold down Shift, constrain the circle to be a perfect circle. So now let's take away the fill and add a stroke. And let's make the stroke really big because we're going to expand it and it's going to turn into our final laser cut ring. And now we're going to make a bunch of holes in this that you're going to sew through to sew the bag onto this. Object, path, outline, stroke. So here's our perimeter. Let's take the, it's now changed it from a stroke to a fill, so let's change it back, take away the fill. You could do that down here, or you could do this up here in this palette. Okay, so now let's use the expand stroke again. Object, compound, oh well, compound path release. So this is a compound path. It is a hole punched out of another circle. Release it. So now we can just select this, and we can create a line along which all these holes will appear. So I'm going to say, this is nice because we're reviewing so many of the things we just covered. Path, offset path, preview. And let's see where we want these to appear. I think the holes should be about midway, so I'll increase this until I have a, yeah, so that's about midway in between the inner edge of the ring and the outer edge. Click OK. So now here's this place where we want all these dots to appear. Let's make a dotted line. I'm going to bring up the strokes palette. There's a dashed line checkbox right here. And this, by the way, this is going to appear on our serger machine because it's going to be just a clear way to just scoop all your stuff into the bag that is held open by this ring out from under your serger at all times. So let's say this dash is only going to be, instead of 12 points, let's say it's just a 2-point dash. But let's add, we really want these to be circles. So let's say it will be a 1-point dash, and the gap between them is going to be 4 points. And now we add the cap. Every line, every path in this stroke that you apply could have a nice little curved end on both ends of the path. I'll show you that. Let's say these are like 3 long. Notice the difference. Flat ends, curved ends. But if you make the dash basically 0 points long, all you have are 2 curved ends, and it's a circle. So let's say, I don't want to sew that often. Just make that many holes. Now, if we expand this object, path, outline, stroke, there you go. Go into reality mode, showing that as soon as we expanded that dotted line, it expanded to be a whole bunch of circles that went along the original path. Now, the dotted line originally was an appearance so that you could continually edit it with those numeric controls, and then we took away that editability and basically expanded it.
If you go around and select all those holes and you use numeric control to put a 1/4 inch.
You can. Yep. So let's say, in fact, that might be a good use for the transform all tool. Right now, this is one big group, so let's ungroup it. Compound path release. No longer a big compound path full of circles. Now we can go into object, transform each. Click on preview. So let's say I want to increase all of them by 120% independently. Now, that doesn't actually cause you to say, here's the exact width I want each one to be. We're going to teach you about a new tool, which is you go into Effect. Sorry, I'm getting a Google Hangouts call. All right. Okay, so if you go in here to, all right, effect, convert to shape. Okay, so I was wrong before. Don't just look in distort and transform. There are a couple of other useful things for toolpaths. Convert to shape, ellipse. You can literally just say, here's exactly what I want each one of these to be. You're converting each one of them to a shape. Let me go back to preview mode, click on this, and I can say effect, 3D, excuse me, effect, convert to shape, ellipse. Whoa, it's huge. You can add exactly a certain amount of extra width. Or instead of saying relatively, here's the extra width I want to add, you can instead just go here, click absolute. You're like, I want it to be exactly 0.25 inches. There you go. And click OK. That is now exactly 0.25 inches. Here's the problem. It's an appearance. Go back to reality mode and reveal that's just an appearance, which means object, expand the effect that we just made. Expand appearance. There you go. Reality mode shows us it is done. Now, what I would do, I would probably take this whole, since, this whole time we've been working in a page. The page is actually at 1 inch. Yeah, like the page that the document I brought up was one of those little figures being milled on the CNC, and it was just an inch wide figure. It does explain some stuff. Tell you what, let's do File, New, and just say we want width to be 8.5. You know, by 11. No, let's just say letter. Okay. So I should tell you at this point, we just created a Adobe Illustrator document. Illustrator, unlike InDesign, is not for multi-page documents. An Illustrator document is for one illustration. So if you want a multi-page document, we have like a brochure or a book or whatever. We have Adobe InDesign in Creative Cloud available to everyone right now as well. And that's what you would use for that. You would import your Adobe Illustrator illustrations, and then you would typeset over a huge book, and then drop in your diagrams or whatever. That's a totally separate thing. So in Illustrator, I would encourage you to not try to make this do what that does well. All right, let's.
Quick question. This right now, with this screen, this past page is a ring, a hollow ring with dots cut. And the laser cutter would cut a ring, and then all these little circles on.
Yep. So the laser cutter, let's go to reality mode again. The laser cutter would follow this path. It would cut that hole out. It would follow this path, cut the whole perimeter, so now we just have a ring. It would go in, and it would cut each little circle out. So basically, it would just follow all these. If you're using cutting mode rather than engraving mode.
And that's just the cutting and engraving mode. The switch between those is just what color we select for the line to match to the laser cutter.
Yes, you pick any color you want in Adobe Illustrator, and Laser Cut will simply bring that in and say, oh, this is another layer. It brings them in as all these different layers, one color layer per color, and then it says they're all the same, speed and power. You say, okay, you go and you edit each one's speed and power, and whether it is an engraved layer or a cut layer. But it's convenient in Illustrator to group these things in advance so that you don't have to group them in Laser Cut because it's a hassle. But it's not that one color is specifically for engraving. Like red isn't, it doesn't care. If it's red, you just decide what it is. Your question? Yeah. 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 So you were talking about how you put an image in.
Let's say I want to put a Celtic symbol in the middle of that.
And you want that to be raster?
I want it to be raster. I want to engrave
it, sure.
that and cut the holes around it.
I would actually, I would try, if this doesn't work, I would try just setting that up by importing the Celtic image raster into Laser Cut, and then importing this into Laser Cut and compositing them there.
Yeah, but I kind of want to try to get a really precise layout.
Yeah. If you can do that, go to File, Place, and I hope this works. Good luck. and you would say, let's say we're going to put an image in here of our parrot. Whoa! Oh yeah, I forgot. This is 1 inch. Let's copy everything. Let's do a Control A, copy, go over to our new document, paste. That's more reasonable. This is a good refresher for stuff we've covered as well. I'm going to click this image, Control Shift left bracket, which will bring it all the way to the back in the Z ordering. With all this stuff selected, if I use Shift, it doesn't just add to my selection, it'll also remove items from my selection. So now I press Control, or I hold down Shift to keep this constrained, not Control, hold down Shift, and I grab its corner and I move it up. Now I hold down Control, or hold down Alt, and by holding down Alt, it keeps the center fixed in place. So I bring it up like this, like so. Now I say good luck because I've had some problems and we need to continue to experiment and figure out why. You take this image and put it into laser cut and it doesn't like it.
See, I've exported it at this point as a DXF, and then when I get to the laser cut, I only have a cut line. I don't have the graphic image that I put in the middle.
I don't think DXF supports images. And this is why yeah, and I'll always support or encourage people to just stick to, if you have Adobe Illustrator, save it as .ai, Illustrator native format, and have laser cut just import that.
Because then I don't, well, I guess I'd have to go to a legacy old copy of Illustrator because the newest one doesn't want to import AI, one that I have on my screen.
Yeah.
So I'll just go back to the legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of compatibility problems between certain really old versions of Adobe Illustrator and the documents saved from those.
Can you show us how to save as for
This is, yes, this is super important. If File, Save As, let's say Parrot Porthole. The crucial key is turn off use compression, whatever you do. This is the tricky bit that's actually going to cause laser cut to not recognize this if it has compression. So you turn off use compression. None of the rest really matters. I like to save this as Adobe Illustrator CS5 just to preserve all the latest editability. Yep. That's the important part. Turn off use compression. Now, notice this is also a color parrot right now. You would have to do the things that we showed you before in Photoshop, turning it into a bitmap image. So that's that. What else to talk about? We talked about convert to shape, Pathfinder, checked, path blend. Oh, right. You know what else you can do? Let's take this parrot and let's live trace it. So click the live trace button. Now notice this is a context sensitive menu up here at the top. Whenever you have it, that means it changes which functionality it gives you based on what you're doing. So I selected an image, and so now one of the things it shows me is live trace. I click it, and it's going to turn raster into vector. It just turned that from a raster format image into a vector representation of it. Now I warn you, it's not done yet because you still have to expand this in order for it to be finished, because until you expand it, you can do all kinds of cool things. Click the tracing options dialog, or just select a preset such as color 6. I'm going to select color 6, and by doing that, it's going to find the 6 most obvious colors in that image and just trace those. That one's pretty good. But I'm going to click the full tracing options dialog, click preview, and let's say I've got color mode, and I can say exactly how many colors I want the finished traced output to have, and how closely I care about those vectors fitting the paths that they found. And I could say I don't even want any path to exist if it's covering an area that's smaller than such and such. That way you could just filter out a lot of extraneous noise. So this is a handy palette. Play around with that one. So here you see I've got this parrot, that image that's been turned into vector paths, which could solve a lot of your problems in some cases, unless you really care about that very gradual appearance we used to have, like the very painterly appearance it used to have. So now we click, it gives you a handy dandy expand button right there whenever the thing is clicked. And there you go. Now, notice, in reality mode, look at all these little dots. In the background, it was a photograph of a watercolor painting Kevin did. And you might want to actually use that minimum area feature that I talked about to just eliminate a lot of these little light gray. Let's go back to preview. They're just little light gray areas. You know, they were indistinguishable because they look just like the white of the background. Control 0 to show the whole page. And that's tracing. Tracing is really useful. So this is not really meant to work with a raster image the way that Photoshop will. It doesn't do a lot the way that Photoshop will. If you really want to work with an image powerfully, but you've got it as a raster, sometimes it's really nice to import it in here and use auto trace to turn it into a vector.
Another question for auto trace.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll take an irregular shaped item and I'll put it down on a piece of paper, and I will go and I will trace a black line around it, and then put it in, and then go live trace over that. And the lines aren't real clean and straight and rounded.
Sure. Okay, so you trace it, and then you take the image of the tracing.
Like someone will send me a pattern or something.
Sure.
So it's a pattern. I
Right.
I bring it in, and then I go to the auto trace. You know, and then I just tweak sliders so it looks like it's the best. But then my lines aren't really nice.
Let me go to an example of this. Making something that's line-based, and you want it to auto trace that's resulting in lines. There's actually a way to do that. I'm gonna go to my i3 Detroit folder because I did a project for this. Laser plotter. So I'm making a gigantic wall of the door to the area. There it is. So I took this image right here. Type screen, share. There we go. All right. So, notice what we got. So we traced this, and it turned every stroke into a shape in the shape roughly approximating that stroke. So now I'm going to click on this button right here, Tracing Options dialog. And what you do is you click strokes. You actually have the ability for it to detect no fills whatsoever. It was detecting everything as a fill before. If I want to, I could say, if something you can't interpret it as a stroke, just ignore it. So I click preview, and there you go. Really, I want to have both of these, because what it just did was, if it saw a stroke, it traced it, and if it couldn't resolve it into just a stroke, it ignored it. So let's click on both of these, and you get the whole thing. Still needs some work, you know, like it needs to be worked more. But you get the general concept. So I'll open up the one that I ended up making. Actually, if you want to know, I actually edited the Elvish in this because I'm that much of a nerd. What do we have? Ready mode. There we go. So here's what I've got. And this is an Elvish font that I found, so I had to go to Object, Expand. So that would actually expand that font. Another thing you can do, so here's how I actually applied the font to a curve. Let's say you want to do that. I took this curve that I had. You could make an ellipse or whatever. See, this curve that was auto-generated by the auto tracing is not one big long path. It's very inconvenient trying to apply a font to the whole thing. So you grab an ellipse like this, and I'll just make an ellipse that approximates it. Use my black arrow tool, grab the corner of it, and constrain it to be really close to the curve that I'm matching. And so now I can say, I take the text tool, and notice when you've got your text tool, the cursor looks like you're just going to place some text. If I go inside here, notice how that outline changes. You would actually be typing within the text. For example, typing font. Character tool. You actually could fill this perimeter with text. I actually want to make text on a path. Grab this. Let me drag this over here so we can see it more clearly. Off to the side. Take the text tool, put it right on there. Font is way too small to see. Opposite problem of my problem of a 1-inch page. So let's make the font size 1,000. Make it 800. So you're typing within the perimeter. You can actually do that. Or you could type around the outside of the path. It has to be a closed path with no open ends in order to be able to type inside it. So let's undo until it is back to being a normal object. Grab that, move it out here again. I'm going to use the direct selection tool to select this anchor point and press delete. So it's no longer a closed path. I can take my text tool, look at the way that the cursor changes its appearance when I get near. That means text that is on a path. Text that is still too small to see. Control A to select all of that and say my size will be 2. Let's say 700. Yeah. So now if I click the black arrow tool, I get these controls. I can grab the left-hand side with this line right here and drag it over to the left. And if I double click into it with any tool, it's going to turn it into a text editability mode. Get the character palette. Let's say reduce that to 500. Text on a path. So let me go to the paragraph controls and say center. And now what I can do is when I take the black arrow and I select this object, I can say this is only dealing with this much of my path. Grab that handle. Move it up. You can even say, I want my center I want my center to be over to the left. Now notice I'm struggling to grab these handles. When my mouse changes its appearance when I get close to where I can grab that and move the center over. So let's say I'm going to make this with my eyedropper tool, look like that. It applies the exact same font as the other font I just clicked with the eyedropper tool. And so now, if I finish with that and I like it, I say Object, Expand Appearance. Expand, and there you go. Now I have my text that's conforming to the path, and I've turned it into something that I can put into toolpaths. So text on a path can be useful for you, or text inside a path if you want to constrain the text to avoid certain areas of your page or what have you.
So a path that you need, and you do a freehand stroke.
Yeah.
And then put the text up.
Any path you want. Yeah.
Like perfect text.
Now, beware that as soon as you apply text inside it, inside that path, or text on the path, following the path, it's no longer going to be able to have a stroke or a fill. So if you really like that shape and that shape matters to you, make a copy of it off your pasteboard. The pasteboard, by the way, is this page. Adobe Illustrator's controls refer to the page as the pasteboard. So you just take it off the page and you just stick it off to the side. Oh, excuse me. The pasteboard is like the entire area, and the page has the pasteboard around it. So you can just make a copy of a path, and then you just put text into or around the perimeter of that. Because afterwards it's going to turn into one of those appearance objects that has all these different controls and is editable, and the original path is just gone. Any other questions? So that's how to work with raster images inside Illustrator. Oh, you know what? You might want to change your page size. While we're talking about the page and the pasteboard, click on Document Setup in the context menu. Whenever you have nothing selected, As long as you don't have any selections, so the context menu doesn't have anything better to do, it'll show you this document setup button. This is really useful. Click Edit Artboards. Now you're immediately changing your actual artboard within the pasteboard. So you can actually drag this corner around and make it whatever you want. Up here you've got numeric controls for your exact pasteboard size. That's how I got a page that was 1 inch by 1 inch very conveniently before. So let's say I want to make an 11 by 17. It's going to be 17 inches wide and 11 tall. Again, if you press Control 0, it'll center it in the window for you. And so as you're adjusting this around, you'll probably lose track of it like I just did. Control 0 is your friend.
Does laser cut care about the big size?
No, it does not. Laser cut does not care about the page size. So here we have landscape. It'll actually rotate whatever you did 45 degrees. And then you click portrait, it rotates it again 45 degrees. So anyway, I press escape to get out of this mode. And now my artboard is 11 by 17. And there's even a, if I go to window, just like a layers palette, there's also a artboards palette. So you can have multiple artboards, and the reason that you can do this, let's say I want to make a new artboard, because I told you not to use multi-page documents in here because it's a bad idea, which is true. But what you can do is, I only want to show a subset of my illustration. So I want to, let's say I want to save my illustration as different segments of it. I can say, there's an artboard there. And there's an artboard there. So I have one big illustration, but I also have two separate ones. So now if I say, I can save as, I'm sorry, I'm completely getting off the subject of toolpaths now, but save for web and devices under the file menu, special form of saving, will actually save this out as a bunch of images, each of which is each individual artboard. Does that make sense? So you can, sometimes, yeah, like you could do a 3 foot by 4 foot artboard in order to simulate the size and shape of the laser cutting bed. Now, personally, I often don't like to say, well, certain things are going to be, like I would not want to use that to say I'm only going to draw in the lower right-hand corner. There are plenty of good reasons to simulate the cutting bed as 3 foot by 4 foot sheet for your artwork if you expect to fill it along some dimension. But I always like to use immediate mode on the laser cutter to say I'm going to move the head of my laser cutter toward the lower right-hand corner and then run my job exactly wherever, just starting wherever the laser head is. I find that it has much better results than simulating the whole
Unless your object is that complex
unless
with that many parts.
Yep. If you plan to fill most of that laser bed with one big job, like you're cutting your entire robot. Actually, Matt Switlick did this. He cut an entire robot with or 3 copies of them, and he just put them in one big document, and he just covered the almost entire laser bed with parts.
Figure out how many you can fit in for you.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it be this?
Automatically.
Wouldn't it be this kind of scheme right here? Having multiple
Not necessarily even multiple artboards, because let's say, okay, so we want to do this. Right. Let's say you just want to do multiple copies of your project all at one time. That's an excellent question. So let's see. Let's use the I3 Detroit keychain pattern. So me and Steve actually. Whoop! Oh, sorry, I just kicked the video tripod. Oh, that's okay. So anyway, me and Steve actually did this on one great big sheet of leather, and the leather had a really weird irregular edge, which made this not the best example for me to use. But let's say that you have a piece you're going to cut these out of, not making leather keychains, but you're just going to cut out of medium density fiberboard or what have you. So let's say we have document setup. My piece of fiberboard is 2 feet by 1 feet. Control 0 to show me the whole page. Oh, not 2 inches. Jeez. 24 inches by 12 inches. So we've got this object, and let's say I just want this to be, let me go to the transform palette. Window. Yeah, you know, transform palette. I only want this keychain to be 3 inches wide. Now, because remember we clicked this button that would constrain width and height proportions, I'm going to undo. I'm going to show you what would happen, by the way, if I just make this 3 inches wide and I don't have that constraint on. There you get, of course, that. So all, Control A for all, and I change the width to, let's say this is a 3, whoops, undo. Click the constrain, make this a 3-inch wide keychain, and now we have this piece of board we know is that exact size. I hold down Alt, and I copy this, and I hold down Shift to keep it perfectly aligned so it's going straight down. Now what I did was I grabbed this and rotated it to save material. Notice when your cursor gets near the corner, it turns into a rotation tool. Now I hold down the Shift key to constrain it to 45-degree intervals. So I can get them much closer now. And in fact, I didn't even like all this space being wasted in the middle, so I moved it over. Hold down Shift to move it precisely over to the side. And then grab the whole thing again. Hold down Alt so that when I click and drag, it's duplicating it. Hold down Shift to move it to the side precisely. Hold down Shift, just Shift, because I don't want to clone it again. Oops. And move it down like that. And now I grab everything again. Hold down Alt. Sadly, no. That's one of the features I miss about Macromedia Freehand in the 90s. I'm sorry, I'm showing my age. But Macromedia Freehand had the, when you would clone, you could then just clone again and again and again. Oh, here's a cool thing. Okay, so let's say that I do this. Oh, watch this. Okay, so I move it to here. I held down Alt, so it's cloning it. Control, Shift. M. So now the exact same movement that I just did is in here again. So in Macromedia Freehand, it was great. You would just press Control D. Here you have an extra step to go through. I just bring up that Move panel, and the numeric controls are precisely the same movement as I just did. So I click Copy, Control 0 to show you the whole page. I just copied it, moving the exact movement I just made. So in a way, you do get to do this. It's just a workaround. So now Control A to grab everything. I'm going to kind of move it over toward the middle of my artboard and get rid of this. Like, that's not going to fit on my piece. And that one's not going to fit on my piece. That one's not going to fit on my piece. Control A to select everything. Move it over like that. So yeah, like I can probably fit this many keychains. Let's say I want to fit another keychain over here. Alt, move it over here. So that'll fit. Let's try to fit one vertically in here. Hold down Alt to clone it. Now I'm going to rotate it, holding down the edge, and then I hold down the Shift key to keep it constrained to 45-degree angles. Well, that doesn't really work well, so what if we flip it, right? Because we're cutting through the whole thing. What difference does it make? We could mirror it. We get the same image, right? So let's use the mirroring tool. So I hold down this tool. You've got scale, shear, reshape. That's not what I wanted. Let's hold down the rotate tool. You got rotate and reflect. That's what I'm looking for. So now it's the reflect tool. Double click it. You can choose between horizontal flipping and vertical flipping, or whatever angle you type in. So I just did horizontal flip. Click OK. I still can't really fit it onto this page, but it was a valiant effort.
You do have some space over in the far right-hand side.
True, true. Let me put this back to how it was.
Take the four bottom ones and shift them left, then you'll have room to.
So let me mirror it like this. Yep. And then I'll grab these by holding down Shift so I'm adding to my selection. Then when I click this and I drag it, and I'll hold down Shift to keep constraining it to drag precisely left. There you go. Look at that. So you can fit a bunch of these on a single sheet this way. Yeah. You know, let's draw a grid. We can draw a grid. So here's the line tool. If I hold down the line segment tool, there's all kinds of stuff. There's an arc, there's a spiral, there's a rectangular grid, and there's a polar grid. So I'm going to grab the rectangular grid tool, and now if you drag and drop, you've got this grid that you can make. Oh, but before you release your mouse, you can click left and right to increase and decrease the number of columns. Click up arrow and down arrow to increase and decrease the number of rows. And then you release, and there you go. There's numeric controls for this too. So let's say I delete that, and I just click instead of clicking and dragging. Then I bring up this numeric control. I want it to be exactly 8 inches wide and exactly 5 inches tall. The number of horizontal dividers will be 4. The number of, neither shall it be 5, nor shall it be 3. Vertical dividers are 3, and 2 is right out. So, click OK, and there's the grid that I just defined with precision. Just what? Yes. Okay, so you can have guides. Let me show you the rulers. Okay, so if we go to View, if you go to View, the View menu, you go down to Rulers, Show Rulers, and once rulers are in place, you can actually create guides. So the guides don't show up in reality mode. They're not going to, whoa, we lost our projector again. Don't show up in reality mode. And they're not going to be laser cut, but they exist for you to snap to in Adobe Illustrator.
So you use rulers to create guides?
Yes. So what you do is I'm sorry that the projector cut out there. We're restarting it. But in the meantime, I'll tell you, if you have these rulers up, you click on the ruler and drag out of it, and you're getting a guideline. Yep. Same way as an Inkscape.
Go and say precisely position this guy on this number, and then you can snap to those guides. You can do a bunch of layout lines.
Yes, you can snap to the layout lines. Now, you only can edit them under special circumstances. So there's actually a setting under View, again, it says Guides, and it has Hide Guides, Lock Guides, and Make Guides. Make Guides is interesting because you can take any path you want and transform it into guides, which means they're no longer really in the document in the sense of they're not laser cuttable, they're not. They exist. They're only there to snap to. They don't print any of those things. Hide guides and lock guides, if you unlock your guides, let me create a guide here. I'll grab that ruler, move it into around here. So that's something you can align to, but because I turned off lock guides, I actually can select it like any other object. The difference is this guide I just made is infinitely tall. It is an infinitely tall, perfectly straight vertical line. And you can drag it left and right. Same principle applies with guides that you create from the top of your screen. You can't rotate. Because there's no, it's infinite. It's infinitely tall, so there's no center point to rotate it around. But there are plugins. People sell Adobe Illustrator plugins for. Yeah, people sell Adobe Illustrator plugins for creating guidelines or snap to, like some triangular, subdivision rather than just 90-degree angles. It's a shortcoming of Adobe Illustrator that is. There's a rich ecosystem out there if you have some money to buy plugins, which, as you can see by looking at my screen, I do, because I love some of these plugins. And you can delete them with the edit mode turned, the lock turned off, lock guides. If what software doesn't actually exist? Oh yeah, well, because it actually is this the Adobe Creative Cloud actually does install software to you on your computer. By cloud, they mean that we don't really own it. I'm not going to go into a huge open source rant. I think you guys know me well enough. But it's, I love Inkscape. I love Illustrator. Illustrator's super powerful, not super great from the openness front. But I will say this, in all fairness, it is JavaScript hackable, folks. It's amazing. You can actually write plugins if you know JavaScript for Adobe Illustrator. I squeed like a fanboy when I found this out. It was the most wonderful thing. So now I'm like dipping my toes into that, and I'll let you guys know what I find out. But yeah, all these extensions for Adobe Illustrator are actually all written in JavaScript.
I guess what I was getting at is if we find a really cool extension and purchase it, then if the only license copy you currently have in Illustrator is the one space is installed, then it sort of becomes available. Is that considered acceptable for the guideline?
I don't know. That's possibly something that we might need to discuss not on the internet while our voice is being broadcast through various channels. But let's say, I don't know.
You can still only use one copy.
As a board member, I plead the fifth, and I would say let's have a discussion with the wardens of the Media Lab Zone. Okay, so using Adobe Illustrator for toolpaths, we've covered a massive amount of material. We've been here for 2.25 hours. Anything else you guys want to cover? Time to practice. Time to practice. Anybody in the anybody? Yeah, it's like a mirror that is presenting itself to a mirror. Yes. When you view your screen while sharing your screen, it shows you sharing your screen. Anyone on the internet want any other topics covered? Any functionality? We talked about these rectangular grid tools. I'm going to show you the polar grid real quick. Control A and then delete. So if you do a polar grid, similar principle. You apply right and left arrows to increase and decrease the arms. Hold down Option in order to drag from the center. Your place you're clicking and dragging from is the center. Hold down Shift to constrain it to a perfect circle. Up and down keys will increase and decrease your concentric circles, a number of them. So that can be great. If I actually prefer this over using a star sometimes. I'll delete that. Suppose I were to make here's the star tool, and I just say I want lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of arms. Go in like this and hold down Control and pull out, and go in and hold down Control and pull out, and making the arms very skinny. Go in, hold down Control and pull out. Okay, so far so good, but there's a disadvantage to this approach. Each one of these arms is 2 strokes. The laser is going to go over it twice. So now I'm going to delete that, go to the polar grid, grab and just press the down arrow until there's only 1 circle, and then press the right arrow until I have the number of arms I want. And now each one of those arms is exactly 1 path. And it's as It's no more inconvenience than just select that. I'm using the white, because this is a group. If I use the black arrow, I select the whole thing. But if I use the white arrow, I select just that circle, delete that line segment, press delete again, and I've deleted the whole circle. Not really inconvenient, you know? And now I know that each one of those paths is exactly one path.
Could you actually specify the number of lines coming out?
Yeah. So the left and right arrow keys will actually increase and decrease those before you release your mouse button.
So you do like 15 and 20 and 30 or whatever you want.
Yeah, so let's say I want to, that's numeric control for that too. So I'm going to delete this, use my polar grid, click, just like we did with the rectangular grid. I can say I want it to be exactly 5 inches, and concentric dividers 0, and radial dividers, I want there to be 19. And there you go. It's way up here. Let's click it and drag it down there. And there you go. And ask if they have any questions. Hide that. So did we get this on video? Excellent.
That's another thing. I was just thinking, I didn't think about it before. You got HDMI out?
Yeah, HDMI out, sure.
Okay, so next time I'll just bring an HDMI recorder and I can record right after out, so the quality will be a lot better.
Excellent. That would be good. And
So the mini or micro HDMI port.
I don't know.
It's the regular size.
Full size?
Yeah, on that laptop.
Full-size HDMI port on this?
Okay.
Yep.
And I almost brought the recorder.
Well, thanks everybody for showing up to the class. And I'm going to do this again this year. Yeah.
So that's
Next time I'll
Yes. We alternate between this class with how to actually create your art and the other class, which is how to operate the GK Waikiki 150 watt 3 foot by 4 foot laser cutter.
So kind of rough rule of thumb is the outline, if your reality shows the lines, the laser cutter will probably do it.
Yes.
Except for the fonts.
Control Y. With the one exception of fonts, reality mode will tell you the truth.
I got the fonts and image.
Question on the Hangout chat. Question on the Hangout chat is
Actually, quickly around.
I don't see a chat. Group chat.
Yeah.
It's a trash can, right?
Oh yeah, the yellow trash can over there.
Right over there.
Good afternoon.
Hi, James.
How's your New Year going so far?
So far, so good.
Yeah, this stuff feels too early to tell.
I got a piece of artwork I was working on the other day that I'm trying to laser cutter to make a cute full age.
So
Yeah, so next time I'll just bring the HDMI recorder.
so I'm looking at my chat to see a question. I've been told there's a question in the Hangout chat, but maybe I'm looking in the wrong chat.
Bring in my walker and sit down and chill for a while.
Yeah, we're actually taking off with him. Everybody ain't going off. Play around some more.
Well, I apologize to whoever asked the question. I don't see it. However, I'm going to hang out for a little while more.
How you doing?
All right.
Oh, no mention?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew I would anyway, but you know, it's never difficult.
Oh, this is for your team?
Actually, I made a
Oh.
band. I've been doing all kinds of stuff.
Do you have any hats to do?
Hmm?
Do you have any hats to do?
No, I was almost gonna wear one and decided to wear that vintage silver.
Well, my buddy, but he's from north. He showed up for the weekend. So I was talking about your green hats and the convention program. So.
Whenever I've been places, some people that don't know that I'm from there, one person, firefly and app on the smartphone. So I thought that, oh, that's way up there. I graduated.
Yes. Okay, Amy L asks, I'm in the middle of making a big project for the ShopBot for the first time. If we have any questions in the future regarding vector designing in Illustrator, is there someone or some way we can reach out for help? Yes. You can either use contact@i3detroit.org, or you can go directly to me, or actually just go ahead and do both, CC both. My email is matt, I'm going to put this into the chat as well. It is matt.mattarn@gmail.com. I'm really happy to answer questions like that. Adding it to the chat now in the Google Hangout. I wish I knew where the other chat was. Here we go. Are there instructions on remotely accessing the Adobe CS Suite from home? No, sadly. There's a question from Daniel Pysock. That is not possible. We use remote desktop, and it's only usable over the Wi-Fi or an Ethernet connection. Here at i3 Detroit, physically present. So only one person can use it at a time also. So it's a good way to constrain it. Like you're far less likely to be able to get onto our shared resource. It's far more likely to be used by somebody. Let's say they're at home and their microwave goes off and they stand up and they go and they forget, and then they just leave themselves connected, and then we're not able to use Adobe Creative Suite. Whereas if we're here and that happens, somebody can walk up and say, hey, you still using it? Poke, poke. And then they would release it for the next person to use. So it's only available as a resource for people who are physically present here right now. I'm going to add that in the comment here too. 15 comments. Wow, I wish I had been seeing that there's this whole comment thread on the actual Google Plus event. Tracing sounds like a useful feature. JavaScript hackable. I understand your excitement. Yes, JavaScript hackable. There's somebody's law. I forget who it is. It's named after somebody, which is any software that can be programmed, eventually there will be a JavaScript equivalent. All right, so I'm going to go through these comments and reply in text. Man, ShopBot. I'd love to have a ShopBot around here.